Loud online fire and 1348 Ex Voto walked straight into both at once. Sedleo shipped a Plague Era Italy adventure about Eta, a knight sent to pull Bianca out of danger, with romance threaded through the rescue like a vow, spoken under a mask. The premise could have carried weight, devotion under quarantine, steel and prayer, loyalty tested by fear. Instead, the launch turned into a case study in how to set a project on fire, before the first stable frame lands. The wreck formed from three forces at once: culture war bait, ugly performance, and a baffling social feud that made outsiders ask, who requested the fight? Attention poured in fast, yet it came preloaded with contempt, and contempt does not become goodwill when the executable stutters. January supplied the spark. Another medieval indie title, Knight's Path, faced a question about LGBTQ inclusion, and the answer leaned on the line fun, not modern agendas, wording that sounded smug and brittle even while staying within legal bounds. Sedleo's official account for 1348, Ex Voto, chose to reply in public with, "Mark it on your modern agendas," a jab that translated into an invitation for the angriest spectators to rush over. The reply did not explain design intent, did not clarify tone, did not promise performance targets, and did not demonstrate restraint. The reply functioned as a dinner bell for rage. A studio can clown on rivals, yet a studio must earn that posture with craftsmanship sharp enough to shave marble. Otherwise, the posture reads as a stumble, paired with a shout of skill issue mid-fall. The predictable wave followed. X lit up. Quote tweets stacked like kindling, and partisan accounts began pre-writing conclusions. Reddit performed calmness while producing essays, and YouTubers circled, with thumbnails already drafted. The funniest and cruelest twist appeared quickly. The game did not need external enemies, because launch performance became the final boss. Steam B's numbers exposed the first bruise. Peak concurrent players reached 427, a figure that suggests a class project, rather than a breakout debut. Steam reviews slid into mixed, and hovered around the mid-40s, with positives and negatives trading blows in near real time. Culture war drive-bys existed, yet plenty of criticism came from the oldest complaint in PC gaming: the thing runs badly. Reports from buyers described stutter during traversal, sharp frame drops during combat, and hard crashes in scenes that should have carried emotional charge. Reviewers echoed the same issues. Tech Radar called out awful PC performance, pointing at stuttering and drops that turned dramatic moments into a slideshow. Games Radar criticized clunky combat and design choices that fought the player instead of the plague. IGN Italy landed on a 5 of 10, a score that reads as comeback after another year, rather than too controversial to judge. Representation did not take the hit first, frame pacing took the hit first, and it dragged everything down behind it. Bug stories delivered meme fuel. Steam reviews mentioned textures breaking in the opening cinematic, lighting flickering like a damaged lantern, and animation rigs snapping at the neck. One complaint described Bianca's head rotating in a full 360-degree spin, a possessed romance option that belonged in exorcism fiction, not a rescue quest meant to sell tenderness. Medieval horror can fit plague fiction, yet unintended horror communicates unfinished work. Even when the comedy landed, irritation stayed, because comedy did not refund time lost to broken checkpoints and failed saves. The tragedy sits in the concept. Eta and Bianca could have worked as more than an angle for marketing. A rescue mission in Plague-era Italy offers natural stakes, gates shut, bodies in streets, priests bargaining for breath, and a knight forced to choose between duty and desire, while the world collapses. Critics who ignored the culture war still flagged the romance as underdeveloped, more declared than demonstrated, leaving fans of the pairing hungry for scenes that earned intimacy under pressure. Anti-woke accounts called propaganda. Supporters who expected a sweeping relationship called thin writing. Ordinary players called for stable frames, responsive controls, and a camera that stops wrestling for authority. All camps found something to complain about, and that convergence usually means a product shipped rough. Online narrative engines then moved into the familiar phase, declare a financial disaster, before any long-tail recovery can even begin. Those declarations often come from personalities who do not review games so much as review vibes, and the vibe meter spikes whenever a protagonist checks the wrong box. Still, the narrative found oxygen in the same brutal metric, 4/27 peak concurrent. Low concurrency does not prove a grand thesis about audiences or ideology, yet low concurrency does signal weak momentum. Early owner estimates circulated in low bands, and the conversation drifted toward modern audience arguments that reduce actual engineering problems into slogans. A game can survive controversy when the game runs well. A game rarely survives being broken, while the studio acts smug. Another gasoline can arrive in the form of subsidy rumors. Viral posts claimed Italian taxpayers funded woke propaganda, turning an ordinary media support mechanism into a conspiracy script. Kotaku dug into the claim and framed the uproar as an absurd spiral. Because the internet often refuses to simply dislike a game, and instead invents a secret council approving a lesbian sword budget. Numbers floated around €650,000 in Italian tax credits and grants tied to Italy's Ministry of Culture video game tax relief program across 2021 and 2024. Tax credits for film and games exist in many countries, and the mechanism is not mind control. Yet, perception becomes reality during a messy launch, and a messy launch makes any funding figure feel like insult. The meme version writes itself: taxes paid, stutter received, head spin delivered as a thank you note. 2 reasons explain the disaster label, and only one belongs to ideology. The first reason comes from pre-release social media ego. Picking a fight in public guaranteed attention from hostile corners, and that attention arrived with the goal of wrecking the launch narrative. That choice was not accidental, that choice was engagement farming. The second reason comes from release day instability. Stuttering, crashes, and animation bugs gave critics and buyers real evidence that something shipped undercooked. Ideological noise does not create frame time spikes create refunds. A studio can weather angry tweets. A studio cannot weather those angry tweets, plus a build that struggles to stay upright. The cynical part of the story sits in the marketing playbook. A target audience gets treated as a resource to harvest, pre-order money, wishlist clicks, hype posts, patience, and endless patch will fix it forgiveness. Culture war framing also recruits unpaid soldiers for comment section battles, turning customers into proxies. The formula looks simple: pick a side, bait outrage, convert attention into sales. The missing step always matters more: deliver a functioning game that deserves the attention. When delivery fails, attention becomes a magnifying glass for every flaw, and the studio loses control of the conversation. The internet did not kill this launch. A jagged frame time graph did. An alternate timeline sits close enough to taste. Imagine 1348 Ex Voto launching clean, running smooth, and letting combat feel tight and deliberate. Imagine romance scenes that show growth through choice and risk, not just a label on a store page. Imagine the modern agendas exchange fading into a footnote, because quality drowns noise. The real timeline flipped that outcome. The tweet became the headline because the game could not overpower the noise with competence. The result harms everyone. Developers get branded as unserious, fans get treated as pawns, and the concept that deserved care becomes a punchline. After the first weekend, the battlefield changed from shouting to damage control. Patch notes began to appear, and each line carried an unspoken question: fixing the game, or merely sanding the sharpest edges to stop the bleeding. Crash fixes came first because crashes end sessions and end reviews, and a single hard crash can erase goodwill faster than any argument about themes. Shader compilation stutter demanded attention next, because plague streets feel less frightening when movement freezes every 10 steps. Reports from mid-range cards described frame pacing that rose and fell like a failing pulse. And those reports shaped the narrative more than any ideological label. Streamers who tried to showcase story beats ended up showcasing hitching, and the audience laughed, then left. Within forums, a new split formed. One group posted hardware lists, driver versions, and exact locations where stalls occurred, treating the launch like an incident response drill. Another group posted screenshots of hostile tweets, treating the launch like a propaganda war. The first group offered a path to recovery. The second group offered only heat. Silence when silence happened invited speculation. Sarcasm when sarcasm slipped out invited backlash. Communication discipline became as important as code, because every message landed on a crowd already primed to assume bad faith. Ata's journey still contained flashes of what could have been. A few sequences captured the pressure of plague logistics, locked doors, rushed prayers, guards fearing infection more than blades. Combat, when frames held, hinted at weight and consequence, with swings that demanded spacing, rather than button mashing. Those moments created cruel tension, because proof of potential also proves that failure came from execution, not from imagination. Bianca's role carried promise as well, yet, scenes meant to build intimacy often arrive too late, too short, or too broken to land. Romance needs rhythm. Rhythm needs stability. Spectacle lost novelty once technical reality became undeniable. Even sympathetic observers began to say the quiet part aloud: a studio can ship a queer romance and still get judged on frames, controls, and pacing. A studio can also ship any romance and still get shredded for the same reasons. Quality control does not care about identity. Quality control cares about test plans, regression tracking, and performance budgets. The choice to ring the rage bell simply ensured that every weakness would be examined by enemies and allies alike, with no room for soft landings. An after-action report writes itself for any developer watching from the sidelines. Public feuds create hostile traffic amplifies flaws, and flaws at launch poison long-tail sales. Scope creep kills polish, and polish decides whether a theme gets discussed as art or dismissed as bait. Marketing that leans on representation must be paired with writing that earns emotion, or else representation becomes a shield in one mouth and a target in another. Grants and tax credits require optics planning because public money invites suspicion when the product looks unfinished. Recovery remains possible, yet recovery demands a commander's mindset, not a social media duelist's ego. Profiling must replace posting, bug triage must replace clapbacks. Patch cadence must be steady, and patch notes must be precise because precision builds trust. Combat must feel consistent across hardware because a parry window cannot depend on a frame spike. Camera logic must stop fighting the player because plague allies already feel hostile without extra sabotage. A buyer standing outside the blast zone still holds the simplest leverage. Money should follow stability, not promises. Reviews written after patches matter more than launch day flame wars. Waiting exists for a reason. Discipline release windows saves careers and studios. The closing image remains bleak, but clear. A knight in a plague mask stepping forward. A rescue oath on the tongue, and a frame hitch cutting the oath in half.